Good afternoon. Welcome to the Shared Services and Outsourcing Network. I'm delighted to be joined by Andrew Monaghan, Head of Shared Services at Qantas. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you.
Now, let's get started. Andrew, recent events have of course thrown Qantas into the media limelight here in Australia. Can you talk to us a little bit about how the Shared Services organisation was affected by this, and also how it helped to minimise the volatility?
Sure. Shared Services at Qantas is actually quite a large complement of portfolios. We've actually got 65 services. They're predominantly focused obviously on supplying a product or a service to what we call our internal customers. Most of the volatility at Qantas comes external from the company to us. So the way that we need to respond to that volatility is to make sure that our processes are sound and that we continue to deliver services so that the operation of Qantas can continue. So that means things like continuing to make sure people are paid on time, make sure that people have access to all their benefits, making sure that property projects continue, making sure that the facilities and the cleaning arrangements at terminals go uninterrupted. So it's really about helping the business deal with the external volatility by providing a service that really just remains straight and true at all times. Now, during a crisis, we do play a significant part in supporting the organisation. In fact, when the crisis management group is pulled together, we provide what's called a logistics function in there, and essentially we do all the running around within the organisation to make sure that the operational areas and the commercial areas can help the end user customers in particular. So we're like the glue of making it happen. So we help in volatility, but the most important thing is that we remain consistent in our product and service offering.
Indeed. At Shared Services Week this year, we're talking a lot about brand recognition and brand strength within Shared Services. And indeed, you're joining us on stage for the Gruen Transfer panel, the grand finale of the event. At Qantas's Shared Services, how do you ensure that your brand remains strong so that you attract and retain the right people, Andrew?
It's probably our biggest challenge. As you can imagine, there's, from an employee proposition, there's lots of opportunities within Qantas for people to go and work. And outside Qantas, there's plenty of opportunities for talented people to go and find work. So it is a real challenge for us. So we have focused on some fundamental sort of elements of that attraction or retention of talent over the last 2 years in particular. And the first one really is making sure we've got good bosses or good leadership. The best leading indicator for attracting people and retaining the talent is having people that people want to work for. If you've got a good boss, people want to go and work for that person, and they want to stay working for that person. You know, pay and benefits aside, that's really the fundamental. So we've made sure that we put in place a good, strong team who reflect the appropriate behaviours that we're looking for, less, interest in the technical ability, much more focus on living what we call at Qantas the Qantas behaviours. So we've been looking for real leadership ability, and we've had some success out of that. So we're at about our third and fourth layer down. Now we are attracting really good people, and we think we've got good leadership in place. So it's been part of our journey for about 2 years serious. It's always been on the agenda, but it's something we've really been delivering on. In terms of our internal brand, we've been playing around with this for quite a few years. We are called Shared Services in Qantas, but we've been toying with the idea whether we brand our individual services as the service or whether we brand it as part of Shared Services, because my view is it should be branded as the service and less so the big parent of Shared Services. For example, at Qantas, payroll, I believe, should be known as payroll, that people shouldn't have to navigate through this thing, is it part of Shared Services or not, to access those services. And it's true of most of what we do. If you're looking for some facilities maintenance help, should that be known as being part of Shared Services, or should you just go to the FM portal? Same with staff travel for us, ID services. in any one of our 65 services. So we've really been toying with making sure that our end product is branded as itself, and it makes sense for people to access that. But making people feel in those 65 departments a part of something bigger, and I think that's what shared services does bring to the table. It brings the opportunity for small teams. Like in Qantas, we've got about 600 people in 60 odd teams. So, you're looking at 9 to 10 people per team. If they were not part of shared services, they wouldn't feel a part of something big and wouldn't have the opportunity to benefit from the programs we run, being a big chunky part of the organisation. So, in terms of branding, we're definitely moving down the road of branding our discrete services rather than shared services. And in terms of attractive proposition for people, we're getting out there and having people know in Qantas that we've got a great culture that nurtures people and looks after them with good bosses. Essentially, that's what our approach has been.
Indeed, and being a dastardly Gen Yer, I think that's very important to certainly attract the younger generation. Now, following on from that, Andrew, I guess the words hire to retire are bandied around in Australia quite a lot. How does Qantas sort of fulfil that strategy? What approach do you take there?
Look, my view is that all of that nomenclature around that customer value stream approach, hire to retire, procure to pay, order to collect, record to report, initiate to close, acquire to dispose, all of those are now well known. I don't think that Australian shared services organisations are particularly far down the road of actually achieving and delivering on that. We've had it on our agenda and part of our strategy for about 4 years. And I would say that we're getting there, we're not there yet. One of the changes we made this year, and in fact we only made it about 2 months ago, was to realign our general manager responsibilities, or what we call heads of, to be more aligned with that end-to-end value stream. And although we used to call it hire to retire and order to collect and procure to pay, we're actually moving away from that nomenclature and describing it in words that people in the business would understand. So hire to retire for us will probably become people services. And we've structured in the last month the departments that fit that value stream under one manager or one head of. And that's just because I believe that to cut through bureaucracy between departments, you actually need to make reporting lines appropriately aligned with that end-to-end strategy. So that's what we've done in the last month. So we've put a people services department together, we've put a finance, operations and logistics together, we've put property services together, and we've got another department we've just put together called risk and compliance. And so people services is really about hire to retire. Finance, operations and logistics is really about procure to pay and order to collect. And property is really about asset lifecycle management in the property space, which is what we would call acquire to dispose. So I don't know that we're going to achieve the nirvana of this sort of what we call the customer value delivery model. But we've gone the next step to try and make it happen by structuring it like that. And we've played with Matrix to a degree, and I think it wasn't as successful as we wanted it to be. So this is our next try at it. And that's one of our principles, is try, and if it doesn't work, try something different.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing in the hire to retire space.
Fantastic. Now, Andrew, you mentioned risk and compliance there, which is very fitting because risk is high on the agenda for 2012 at Shared Services Week. What role do you think shared services can play in enterprise risk management, and indeed in the collection of data for the wider enterprise calculation of overall risk appetite?
This is probably another space that there's been a lot of talk, particularly in Australia, about taking data that shared services has and helping the business make decisions using it. I'm not sure how successful people have been at doing that. Certainly that's been one of our aspirational goals, to get to more data for the business in a way that the business understands the data and can actually make use of it to make good strategic business-based decisions. So where we have had the aspiration of getting there, haven't quite got there. But one of the changes we made in the last month to try and get there, that I've really wanted to have in place for a number of years, that we haven't been able to afford just due to the low margin business we're in and constant focus on costs, is we've now appointed a head of risk and compliance, and we've been able to achieve the outcome of placing that role into the team by the shake-up that I spoke about in the last answer, where we've realigned certain general manager or head of roles. The role of that person will be looking across the entire shared services portfolio. At Qantas, we look after 2 million square metres of property, about $15 million in receipts, in cash receipts, $3 billion in payroll, many millions in workers' compensation, and the list goes on. We're looking after hundreds of processes with millions of points of data. We need to make sure for us that we're comfortable those processes are delivering in accordance with an appropriate governance framework. Now, we've obviously had internal audit and external audit and risk and compliance over us from a group perspective from a long time. But we've decided to take the step to take greater responsibility for ensuring that our processes are delivering. And it just helps us all feel comfortable that we can focus on the value add stuff and the process looking after the quality, rather than us constantly running around having to make sure that the quality's right by intervention in the process. So that's really the role that we've just put in place. The outcome of that will then be the process is delivering data that is accurate and is characterised by quality, so that we can then go out to the business in our stakeholder meetings and say, are you aware of this? This data is telling us this. Would this be valuable to you to make decisions? So it's been on the agenda for a long time for us to have a role like this. We've now achieved it, and the mandate is go forward and make sure the processes are delivering on our promise.
Yeah. Another step forward into more high value add and less transactional roles. It's very interesting. You can hear a lot more from Andrew on site at Shared Services Week in April down at the Melbourne Conference and Exhibition Centre. Until then, thank you from Andrew and thank you from myself. Thanks, Andrew.